So first and foremost, for folks at home, why should they vote for you?
Well, I think there's some things that the people in Jacksonville should consider. Is that I'm a native of Jacksonville. I do intend to live and stay here in Jacksonville. I'm committed to this community. I've had the honor and the privilege to serve as a police officer within the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office for over 24 years. And once I retired in 2010, Emily, I remain relevant in the community because this is a place where I live and a place where I love. I love the people in Jacksonville. I want to make Jacksonville a safe place. I want it to be a topic of conversation when they bring it up. They don't bring up the fact that we've been labeled the murder capital of Florida. I want them to be able to say that it's a nice, peaceful place. And I intend to do that if elected. I'm going to concentrate my efforts on being a community sheriff. And what I mean by that is I can't govern and I won't try to attempt to govern the sheriff's office from behind a desk. I will be out and about in the community, but not only me, we've got to reintroduce the entire police department back to the community. And I have a plan that will get officers out of the cars, back in the community, but not just the officers. I'll be there with the officers because transformational leadership requires that you lead by example. So I'm going to be out and about in the community with the officers as we go about introducing ourselves to the business community, the faith-based community, and the lay community so that we can start building the relationship, because in some parts of our city, the relationships is fractured. And we've got to repair that, and we got to do it now. It took a while to get that way. It's going to take some time to repair it, but we've got to start now.
And you were running for sheriff. There are several issues I'm sure you want to tackle if you were to win the office. Would you say that's your #1 priority, or what is the biggest issue you think you would change?
Well, I don't have just one #1 priority. I've got a couple of number one priorities. That is one of them. The other priority is addressing the gun violence that we have here in our city. Every weekend, sometimes every day, we hear about someone getting shot, and a lot of times people are getting shot with firearms that's been stolen or purchased on the black market or whatever. We can't hide behind the issues. We got to face it head on. And I'm going to roll my sleeves up and I'm going to get out there, right, a type of in-your-face type of person to address that issue. I'm also going to advocate with the legislator to have stiffer penalties for gun owners who are irresponsible with their guns, who leave them unsecured, and they get into the wrong hands. They get into the hands of children, they get into the hands of thieves, and they're used in other crimes. So I'm going to advocate with the legislator, work along with the legislation to get stiffer penalties for persons who's convicted of not properly securing their weapons, and that weapon is used to kill someone else or used in a robbery or an assault or anything criminal. They need to have stiffer penalties.
The Jacksonville Sheriff's Office through the years has been plagued by problems, and it's been a while since you've been there, but at one point you were. What part would you say you play in some of the issues that JSO has faced or dealt with, and were you a part of that solution? Yeah, so the biggest issue that I'm hearing from the citizens of Jacksonville is transparency, lack of transparency. I'm also hearing that it's very difficult to get records. I'm hearing that not just from the press, but I'm hearing it from lay people who go to the sheriff's office and try to get proper documentation for whatever reason they need it for. And then I'm also hearing that there's issues in the communications center when you dial 911. So one of my key issues, again, one of my top priorities is to transform transparency with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. So my very first day in office, I intend to sign an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, to partner with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, turning over to them every police-involved shooting as well as every in-custody death, have them investigate those and report back to the agency. And then I also will impanel a commission of civilians, excuse me, composed of high school students, college students, the faith-based community, the business community, lay people. That commission will meet every other month, meet with the sheriff and his staff. I want a grade. Tell me how we're doing. Tell me what you need. Tell me what we can do better, and tell me where we fail. Give us a grade, A, B, C, or F. Well, D too, but let's not leave that out. But I want to hear from the community. I want the community always to be involved with how we operate and how we do things. And during your time that you were with JSO, how were you pushing for transparency? Well, during the time I was with JSO, I did all I could with transparency. That belonged to the powers that were in charge at that particular time. I served in 9 different positions, none of which I had the ability to make policy decisions or policy changes. But once elected, I'll have that ability to do that. Looking from the inside out and then the outside in, I see the issues. I hear the issues from the community. So I know exactly how to go in and tackle those issues.
You mentioned it a little bit earlier, but you're right. I mean, especially anchoring weekends, I feel like every Sunday night it was a violent weekend in Jacksonville or a deadly weekend in Jacksonville. If not every weekend, almost every weekend. What specifically would you do to curb the gun violence?
Yeah.
I mean, how do you tackle something that's so big?
You have to take an intelligent approach with it. You have to have proactivity and visibility. You've got to be present in these neighborhoods where the majority of these issues are happening. So you've got to be proactive. You have to try to deter that type of behavior, and you've got to be visible. So what I would do, I would be out there with my officers, because I don't want to ask my officers to do anything that I'm not willing to do. I won't be out there all the time, but I will be out there with our sleeves rolled up with the officers, and we'll take an approach to concentrate in those particular areas. I'll depend on intelligence data so that I'll know where we need to concentrate on, and then we'll use that to make decisions as to how we actually handle it, and we'll monitor it and keep the community apprised of what we're doing and how we're doing it. By keeping the community involved, by saturating those areas, by having a high visibility in those areas, then that's going to help build a relationship, that fractured relationship that I talked about, back with the community, because there are those that feel that they're policed and not served, and they feel that the only time that the police stop to engage with them is when they're on a call. We need to change that. Even if it's not true, we need to change that image. We need to change the culture of that thought process. We need to let the people in the community know that it's not us against you, it's us working together. And when we work together, you provide information, because the police really doesn't solve crimes. It's the community.
Do you feel like there was ever really a time were with JSO for a long time, you're a native here. Do you feel like there was ever really a time where there was that relationship with JSO and the public?
I do. I experienced that time. Back in the 80s and early 90s, the relationship was a whole lot better. You always had your few that disagreed with the police or was negative against the police, but they were in the minority. But there was a time where the relationships were good under Sheriff Nat Glover's leadership. You saw a lot of that happening, and you saw people who had a sense of peace in the neighborhoods, and I want to restore that. I will continue to do the sheriff's walks, just without the hoopla and the fanfare. No offense against the media, but I don't need the media with me on the sheriff's walk. I want to converse and talk and meet with the people that I serve, because that's what they deserve and that's what they expect. So we'll continue the sheriff's walks. We'll continue to engage the community in every aspect of the word.
When it comes to some of these violent crimes, it's not just that as a problem. There's also the issue of the solve rate, which, depending on who you ask, JSO would argue that their transparency page isn't quite correct, that the numbers are more in the 70s as their solve rate. Our data shows it's closer to 30. The national average is 51%. I mean, what is your thought on where the city stands on the crimes that it solves, whether it's homicides or murders in that realm of violent crime, and what do you think it reasonably should be and how we get there?
Well, if you don't have a relationship with your community, you're going to have a low rate, excuse me. You're going to have a low rate because people aren't cooperating. You've got to do every single thing to try to get information, whatever. I think by building the relationship with the community, restoring the trust back with them, they cooperate more. And when they cooperate more, we'll break that stigma of snitches get stitches. That's what the word is on the street. Don't talk to the police, don't tell them anything. Now that narrative changes if their family members involved, because they want everybody to talk. But as the sheriff, your responsibility is to make sure that you have properly allocated all your resources, particularly in the homicide division, that you have you are working diligently every day to build a relationship up, because it's not a one-time deal where you go out and say, hey, how you doing? I'm officer friendly and I work in this area. I need you to cooperate with me. That doesn't work. You've got to show people that you care. You've got to show people that we're in this together. And you have to also show people that no matter what side of town you live on, crime affects everybody in Jacksonville. If a child or a person is killed on the north side, it affects Mandarin, it affects South Side, it affects Baldwin, it affects everybody, because you're moving about the city, and crime has a propensity to take on feet, and it'll move. So we all have to be involved. We all have to cooperate. We all have to try to build and work together, build that relationship back up, so that we can have a peaceful city. And then you'll see the crime rate go down and the clearance rate go up.
Mm-hmm. You talked about resources a little bit. Let's discuss that, because for another year in a row, the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office budget is continuing to increase. It's now going to be $550 million. But with the exception of the brief respite during COVID, violent crime hasn't shown a corresponding decline. How do you plan to manage that much money and the expectations that are going to be on that and on you?
Let me first say, you can't continue to do the same thing and expect a different result. You can't do that. You can't continue to ask for money and nothing is changing in the city with regards to crime. The rate's still going up. The homicide rates are still going up. I would need to know, because I don't know what the line items are on that budget. Why did they ask for an additional $34 million, I believe it was, for the current budget? I would have to do a top-down forensic audit my first day in office to see exactly where all this money is going. What resources are you pouring it into? Are we top heavy? Do we have too many people in an appointed position where those positions can be managed by lieutenants versus assistant chiefs and things of that nature? I would need to assess and then reassess with my budget team, with my CFO, to see exactly, tell me why in 2022 you requested an additional $34 million. I need to know why. I think the public deserves that, because that's your money.
So would you make that public, money. The findings of that public?
I would make the findings of that public, absolutely. But as I said, I want to be a 100% unequivocal, transparent sheriff in everything that we do. There's nothing to hide. Shouldn't be anything to hide. As long as it's not going to compromise the way we do business, compromise cases or whatever, let's just make it available to the public, make it available to the press. You are the public. Make it available to you if you request that sort of thing. Make your public request a whole lot easier as well compared to how it's being done now.
So the question, the last one I've got for you is, in your opinion, is the future of JSO more of the same, or it sounds like, a good hard look at what's going on and potentially an overhaul?
That's a good question. With me, it's not more of the same. It's not more of the same. We need to have transformational leadership going into the sheriff's office, and that will trickle down based on the example that's given by the leader. Again, I will be a sheriff of the community. I would not be a sheriff of the bad guys, of course, but I will be a sheriff of the community. We will embrace the community, and hopefully we can build that relationship back up. But let's not get it twisted. We'll be tough on crime as well, because we've got to get a hold on what's going on. And we can't continue to do the same thing, because obviously it's not working. And so I will work every day to ensure the public, the people of Jacksonville, that your sheriff's office has your best interests at heart. While you're sleeping, we're working to make sure that you're safe.